Good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year. Tonight is our annual reorganization meeting. The date is January 4th, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Sunshine Law. Please be advised that this meeting is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 Sunshine Law, and that adequate notice of the date, time, and agenda has been sent to the Asbury Park Press and the news transcript and has been posted and filed with the Marlboro Township Clerk. Copies have also been sent to each district school and other area newspapers in accordance with the law. I'm not going to read in full, but please be advised of the statement of videotaping of public portion of Board of Education meetings, the public comment statement pursuant to Board Policies 0164 and 0167, and also no smoking on school grounds. Can we please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So announcements, I'm going to read the results of the November 2nd, 2021 election. Total ballots cast were 37,090 votes. There are the top three for the three vacancies of the three-year term. Were in order of votes. Mrs. Christina Rosado received 5,212 votes. Mrs. Kathleen Amster received 4,916 votes. And Mr. Aldo Petruno received 4,682 votes. Now, for the two-year term, Mrs. Jessica Piernick received 4,538 votes. So now if the newly and recurring board members can come up to the table, we will read the oaths. Please put your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand, please, and repeat after me. I, please state your name.
I, Jessica Piernack,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same
and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same
and to the governments established in the United States
and to the governments established in the United States
and this state
and this state
under the authority of the people,
under the authority of the people,
so help me God.
so help me God.
I, please state your name,
I, Jessica Piernack,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law
for the office of member of a Board of Education,
for the office of member of a Board of Education,
am not disqualified as a voter
am not disqualified as a voter
pursuant to RS 19-4-1,
pursuant to RS 19-4-1,
am not disqualified due to conviction of a crime
and not disqualified to conviction of a crime
or offense listed in NJSA 18A 12-1,
or offense listed in NJSA 18A 12-1,
and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly
and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly
perform all the duties of that office
perform all the duties of that office
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Okay, now I'm going to do an official roll call of the newly elected and re-elected board members. Mrs. Amster? Mrs. Branch?
Here.
Dr. Heller?
Here.
Mr. Petruno? Ms. Piernick?
Here.
Mrs. Shrem?
Here.
Mrs. Rosado?
Here.
Mrs. Salaci?
Here.
And Mrs. Strafasi?
Here.
And congratulations to the new board members once again. Okay, now we're going to move on to the election of board president. Before we move ahead, Mr. Zittimer is going to read bylaw 0152.
Just for the benefit of the board, if you could just turn off your mic, thanks, or whoever's got their mics on, thanks. For the benefit of the board and the community, I just wanted to read the board policy on the election of officers so that everybody's clear on what we're doing. It's board policy 0152. It says the board shall organize its first regular meeting by electing one of its members president and another as vice president. Any member may place a member's name in nomination. A motion with a second must be made to close the nomination for either office. If more than one candidate is nominated for either office, said candidate shall be given an opportunity to make a brief presentation on behalf of their candidacy. Election for each office will be conducted by a roll call vote in which the individual board member must state for whom they're casting the vote. The candidate receiving the majority vote of the members of the board present and constituting a quorum will be elected to the office. Voting shall be taking place by verbal roll call vote after the nominations are closed. When more than one person has been nominated, the board will vote on the candidates in the order in which they're nominated. In the event that no candidate receives a majority of the vote of the board members present and constituting a quorum, the procedure shall continue until someone receives a majority vote.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open nominations for board president.
I have a nomination to make. Randy Heller for board president.
Yeah, I want to nominate
Do I have any
Kathleen
seconds?
Amster.
I nominate Kathleen Amster for board president.
So give that to Mr. Rosado and Mr. Petruno.
I second for Randy Heller.
Actually,
We're not there yet.
yeah, and the policy actually does not require a second on the nominations, just to close the nominations, but we're not there yet.
So at this time, since we have two nominees, Mr. Heller and Mrs. Amster will be.
Ask if there's any other nominations.
Oh, actually, are there any other nominations for board president at this time?
No, I just have a quick question. Do you have to be present to be nominated or vote?
You have to be, yes, you have to be present either physically in the room or on the screen.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
We're allowed to have our meetings virtually or in person, so if we wanted to have the entire meeting virtually, we could have done so. It's perfectly permissible for the members on the screen to participate in the meeting and vote. Sir, this is not a debate. Okay, then I do. We're done. Who? Who are you talking about? Sir, we're not going to be disrespectful. He doesn't get to vote. He's here as a participant in the audience. What's that? Why aren't you allowed to be on Zoom? The question was, who gets to vote? Sir. There's a question, and I'm happy to answer it if you'd stop interrupting. Okay. The people that get to vote for the office of president, which is about what we're about to do, is the current board members. Mr. Schifferson is no longer a board member. He doesn't get to vote. I don't know. Okay, let's move on. What kind of problem are we going to have? Are you threatening me? Excuse me? Okay.
Okay. So where we're at is we have two nominees, so we will be given the opportunity for Mr. Heller and Mrs. Amster to state their case of why they believe they should be board president.
Before we do that, Mr. Carabello, we should make a motion to close the nominations.
Sure. Motion to close nominations?
Somebody needs to make that motion.
Motion to close.
Need a second?
I second.
Discussion? Discussion? All in favor of closing the nominations?
All in favor of closing nominations?
Aye.
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 Okay, so either can, you're right, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So now we're at the point where Mr. Heller and Mrs. Amster, you're given the opportunity to state your case of why you believe you should become board president.
If they choose to. They don't have to. The policy allows for them to if they'd like. I was not prepared for anything.
Mrs. Amster?
Sorry. I wasn't prepared either, but I've been on the, I think everybody well aware, I've been on the board 3 years. I'm not accustomed to working hard, even though I haven't had any leadership positions on this board. I currently hold multiple leadership positions in my real life. I'm the co-president of Parents Club of ROTC, and I would love to take on more responsibility, more leadership, if given the chance. Thank you.
You vote on Mr. Heller.
Yep.
Dr.
So
Heller first.
Dr. Heller is the first nomination, so we're going to go to a roll call vote for presidency. Mrs. Amster?
No.
Mrs. Branch?
Yes.
Mr. Petruno?
No.
Ms. Piernick?
Yes.
Mrs. Shrem?
Yes.
Ms. Rosado?
No.
Mrs. Salaci?
Yes.
Mrs. Trafasi?
Yes.
And Dr. Heller?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Board
Congratulations, Dr. Heller.
Congratulations, board presidency goes to Dr. Heller.
Am I allowed to make a speech or say something?
You can make a comment, certainly.
Okay. Happy New Year's. As a big fan of Disney, some of you might be familiar with the movie Meet the Robinsons, which I would like to reference, and I'm hoping that it will resonate with the students, the staff, the parents, the families, and the community members of Marlboro. And that is keep moving forward. We have navigated uncharted waters during these unparalleled times over the last few years, and with the support of the community members, resilient school staff and administration, and students who can only describe as rock stars, we have done just that, kept moving forward. Regardless of the obstacles and the uncontrollable challenges presented to us all. We have all done our best to move forward. As board president, I wanted to implement this motto into all we are going to accomplish in the upcoming year. I would like to emphasize that by working collaboratively with board members, parents, staff members, and vested members of the community, my goal is to enable a learning environment that is safe, secure, and innovative. In essence, your Board of Education is going to keep moving forward. More importantly, your Board of Education is absolutely going to advocate positivity. Under my leadership, we will not endorse hatred, nor will we tolerate adversity towards one another. Instead, I want to promote an environment that listens, brainstorms, and develops solutions by gaining board consensus, compromising when necessary, and implementing decisions that allow us to keep moving forward. My commitment to you is that I will lead efforts to embrace diverse ideas and listen with empathy, not argue or dismiss because of differing beliefs. I will be representatives for the community as a whole, and you have my pledge to work diligently for the children. My only ask is to keep an open mind, listen with respect, and form opinions based on facts and not assumptions. If you are unaware or have questions, just ask me. I will hold myself accountable for delivering transparency and maintaining an open line of communication to the best of my ability. This is your board, and I am so humbled and proud to become your president. As the volunteer and tenured member of the board, our community has been my priority since day one. As a member, I would like to share some highlights of my time served so far, which I hope will be an indicator of what can be offered as president. I led the district in implementing various school security measures to fortify safety. I was at the forefront of the implementation of updated policies that spotlighted emotional, social, and behavioral health with a district-wide initiative. I championed the execution of various basic school programs to make sure all children are not left behind. In addition, I spearheaded the enhancement of the district website by instituting a more user-friendly format and functional tools for improved communication. These accomplishments and other initiatives would have not been accomplished without the support and guidance of your board. As a district, historically, 98% of our former students, from those in special needs to those in AP and honors classes, and everyone in between, went on to attend college with a fair amount going into highly competitive schools. For those who had chosen a different path, our students were well prepared with the skills necessary to gravitate toward trade careers, military, or successful jobs. These are accomplishments our current students should thrive for. These are positive accolades which at Marlboro Public Schools should be recognized for. In closing, as your newly appointed president, I want to ensure that your voices will be heard and the decisions will be made in order for all of us to keep moving forward and maintain a positively Marlboro BOE. I look forward to working hard for you and alongside my colleagues. I also want to encourage all parents and community members to stay informed, ask questions during uncertainty, and allow us to advocate for you and the students the best of our ability to ensure that as a community and as a district, we keep moving forward. Stay connected, stay safe, be well, and Happy New Year. That's it.
The floor is yours, Dr. Heller.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to open up the nomination for Vice President.
I have a nomination.
Yes?
I would like to nominate Tricia Branch for Vice President.
Tricia Brandt, is there anyone else? Is there
Yeah, right here. Kathleen Amster.
Kathleen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do I second, or how does that work?
Are there any other nominations?
Are there any other nominations?
Now need a motion to close the nomination?
Could I have a motion to close the nomination? Sorry. I have Jill.
You need a second.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Jen is the second.
Discussion?
Is anybody want to discuss?
Okay. Motion, you can do by acclamation. All in favor of closing the nominations?
All in favor of closing the nominations?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed?
Any opposed? I'm sorry, guys. I'm just learning this.
No, that's okay. Now we will go, since Ms. Branch was the first person nominated, we will go to a roll call on Ms. Branch.
Roll call vote, Mrs. Amster,
No.
Dr. Heller,
Yes.
Mr. Petruno,
No.
Ms. Piernick,
Yes.
Mrs. Shrem,
Yes.
Ms. Rosado,
No.
Mrs. Salaci,
Yes.
Mrs. Strafasi,
Yes.
and Mrs. Branch.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mrs. Branch.
Congratulations, Tricia.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I just want to echo everything that Dr. Heller said. I'm excited to be part of the leadership team here at on the board, and I'm very hopeful. I think I said this at the last meeting. I'm very hopeful that we will work together to bring about positive outcomes for the kids and the education, the benefits to their education. I'm going to work hard every day to deliver the best education that we have for our children, that our money can provide. And I'm excited to work as a united team to be successful in getting that done. I think my role as a vice president will be to be a very active listener and very proactive in, in creating very positive construction action on the board and for our kids and the taxpayers of this community. And I'm honored that you all put me in this position, and I thank you very much.
We're going to talk
Recognition
of outgoing board members. So congratulations to Paul, Robin, and Steve. I believe we have something for you. If I may, I'd like to say some, respectfully, some nice words about each person because they did serve on this board. I want to thank Paul for his time over the last 6 months when he stepped into the role as a Board of Education member. His time should be measured by quality, not quantity. He entered the position smoothly and provided great insight and perspective. As a father and dedicated member of the community, he took on the volunteer role to support the students of Marlboro. Thank you, Paul, and good luck beyond the board.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. Steve has been an administrator and a board member of the Marlboro Township Public Schools for over 30 years. He has been a value to all who have engaged in him in conversation. His insight and experience were instrumental and extremely helpful to all. He will surely be missed, but not forgotten, as I would like to take this moment and I would like to ask that he be recognized on our plaque for those who served the public school community for 25 plus years. He was an invaluable member of the BOE of the district, but more importantly, a great person. Steve, best of luck moving forward, but I'd like that to be taken care of if nobody opposes that. Okay, just saying, throwing that out. And then Robin had all the greatest intentions and passion to serve her community. As a dedicated mother and wife, a dedicated volunteer, she worked diligently as a board member with great precision and notable achievements. She dedicated so much of her time to this board, and even more so as a board president for the last 4 years. She cared greatly in what she did for the community, and especially for the children. Robin was a truly passionate volunteer for this board for the last 7 years. Now, as she retires from this position, she can be proud that the students of Marlboro had been greatly impacted by the results. Robin, thank you for your years of dedication and commitment to Marlboro community. Good luck to all you do. We wish you the best. You're welcome. Are there any announcements? Super.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I'd like to echo for all three, for Paul, Robin, and Steve. Steve, for so many years, you served Marlboro as both an administrator and a board member, so thank you so much. And Robin, thank you for your countless hours. You are one of the best people I've ever known and met, and you are such a supporter for all children, and you pushed me constantly and made me better as a superintendent. So I thank you very much for your leadership, and I wish you obviously the best to you and all of the Wolf family. Thank you. As far as announcements go, I would just like to sadly announce that today I tested positive for COVID-19, and that's why I'm on this Zoom. Otherwise, I would be sitting there in public with you right now, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Hibbs. Before that, I'd like to actually make another announcement to recognize the new board members. I want to take this time to welcome Aldo, Christina, and Jessica to the board. I am very much looking forward to working with you and getting to know you better. I did have the opportunity to briefly speak with each of you prior to tonight, and I can confidently say that I think each of you will bring a tremendous asset to the board. I hope you have felt welcome, and I encourage all members to engage with each one and get to know who they are on a personal level, a professional level, and a community standpoint level. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm still trying to get used to this. Public comments.
So public comment?
Yeah, hold on, there's a whole thing. Bear with me. Sorry, guys. Patience is a virtue. What am I supposed to? I'm just looking for
on the first page of the agenda.
Okay, pursuant, I'll just go along with this. Pursuant to the board policy 0164 and 0167, Robert's Rules of Order shall govern the Board of Education in its deliberations and in the conduct of its meetings. As such, all comments from the public and from other members of the board should be directed to the board president and who is responsible for proceeding over the meetings. The president shall direct all inquiries or comments to the appropriate administrator or board member for a response. After all members of the public have had the opportunity to speak, the board administration may not have a response for all inquiries at the public meeting. In those circumstances, Thank you. I just lost my train of thought. In those circumstances, a response will provide in a timely manner. Per board policy, if it appears that the public participation will exceed 60 minutes, the board president may impose a set time limit per speaker at the beginning of the public participation portion of the meeting. Every person, again, I lost what I needed, but it's okay. Each individual will have 3 minutes to speak. And is there anything else? Anybody? No? Okay. So let's have fun.
So I'm going to call to the podium first Mr. Lenny Thor, and when you come to the podium, please state your name and address and any affiliation. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I need to add. Thank you.
You have 3 minutes to speak.
Lenny Thor, 8 Quail Court. Public speaking is not my thing, and neither is politics, but after watching our Board of Ed meetings for several months now and shaking my head in disbelief and embarrassment, I feel I have no choice but to come here. While there are a handful of people who discuss valid issues, the majority either enjoy political theater or enjoy hearing themselves speak. I followed our recent elections and was disgusted with how certain candidates and their supporters conducted themselves. Our township is divided like never before, and I blame them fully for this. They gladly took an endorsement from a former board member who made USA Today for upsetting the Muslim community a few years ago. They took endorsements from other board members with political vendettas. While this slate won 3 seats, they did not win all 4. The only head-to-head match they had, they lost. Last meeting, all I heard about was how they won 3 spots while neglecting to mention the seat they lost. However, it is obvious this township doesn't agree with all of their beliefs if they did not win all their seats. The slogan, "Parents, not politicians," is a farce, since the entire campaign reeked of mudslinging and politics, and they seem more concerned about calling it to 101.5 about our kids' education. Last meeting, I saw members of the community attack our school nurses when they stated that masks help prevent the spread of COVID in our district. I will take the word of our school nurses who deal with this on a daily basis and have medical backgrounds, or people who have a medical degree from Facebook. When parents go on an airplane, do they throw a stink and demand the airlines not comply with federal mandates? I've noticed that when parents are positive role models with masks with their kids, they don't seem to have an issue wearing them. I've also seen lawsuits filed in Wisconsin by parents against school districts for not requiring masks and having lax COVID protocols. Do we really want to end up getting sued? While we'll have to agree to disagree about the effectiveness of masks, the mandate is out of our board's control and we should not sacrifice our state funding. I have spoken to others in this town and they are afraid of these cyberbullies. I ask to those who are afraid, what is there to be afraid of? Will someone with the maturity of a 5th grader make a meme about you? It is time for us to come out to these meetings and not allow our township to be repeatedly embarrassed. I hope that the focus turns into legitimate concerns such as learning loss from last year, concerns from parents in CPAG, and staffing shortages.
1 minute, Mr. Thor.
But then again, who wants to work in a district with parents who act like this? I am also concerned about staff morale because COVID has taken a toll on them. The focus needs to be on our kids' education. I hope we can finally talk about the issues at hand, since the rest of the noise at these meetings has nothing to do with our kids. I also hope that we can have a hybrid Zoom option for these meetings, since it is challenging for many of us to attend these on a monthly basis and be able to speak. Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you. Vin?
Next up is Ms. Radhika Sharma.
Hello, respected board members and members of our community. My name is Radhika and I live in Marlboro. My address is 19 Whistler Way. My older son graduated from MMS and my younger one is still in MMS. There are 2 things I would like to talk about. One, I want to take this opportunity to applaud and show support for the steps taken by BOE so far in keeping the kids safe in the last couple of years. I'm also thankful for the BOE for not caving in to a very few very vocal residents who find some of these steps inconvenient in the face of health risks that can be life-threatening for many. So I thank them for sticking with science and with the CDC guidelines that have understandably changed from time to time based on new research and changes in our COVID environment. I applaud our community for trying hard to accommodate small inconveniences for the benefit of the larger good. In hard times like these, we have to look out for the weaker sections of the community and be more kind and considerate than usual. So thank you all for helping out in these hard times. The second thing I want to talk about is I have a couple of questions. Do we know why it takes a whole 24 hours for quarantine kids to go remote? And the second question is, are kids allowed to go remote for the 3 days that they're still waiting for their PCR results? I speak for quite a few parents when I say that while the school has the technology and the means to go remote, if the BOE could consider expediting the virtual option for kids when they suspect exposure or experience symptoms, that will encourage kids to voluntarily quarantine more readily than they do now. There are two advantages to that. One, they will quarantine and they will help limit the spread of COVID. Two, they will not miss classes, and this will help their grades. So I know Dr. Hibbs mentioned that the governor has to decide on this, but ABC News reports said that Governor Murphy has left it to the districts to decide on when to go virtual. So if there's a concern that kids will misuse the option of going virtual, we can maybe put a limit of 4 days by when they should submit a positive PCR test to continue being virtual for longer. Also, this will not go against the new stance that the district is taking on imposing quarantining, which is to assume good health without testing. This option allows students and parents to volunteer quarantining. So I will repeat my two questions. Why does it take longer than 24 hours to go remote? And the second one.
Time is up, Mrs. Sharma.
Yeah. Are the kids allowed to go remote for the 3 days that we're waiting for the PCR results?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, you wanna jump in and take those? Can everybody hear me okay?
Sure. Thank you, Mrs. Sharma, for your comments. Regarding the 24-hour period, it is a 24-hour period, not longer. And essentially, the reason for that is to allow our teaching staff to get the links up and running for our students. So we typically take the first day, that first 24-hour period, as a preparation time for them to get the links going. Sometimes they're not notified until the day has already begun. So they're teaching all day long, and they could be notified maybe, that morning or in the afternoon. So then we give them time to get the link set up for that 24-hour period. So we know it is a slight inconvenience, but it really allows our staff members the ability to get their the link set up for the students at home and all of the materials that they will need should they need to access those materials in a virtual manner. So we just want to make sure that we are crossing every T and dotting every I to make sure instruction is as seamless as possible. As far as quarantining and isolation, we do allow, if students are set on quarantine or isolation, we do allow them, again, it has to be the 24-hour period, but if they are put out due to those reasons, they will qualify for remote instruction at that time. I think I addressed all of your questions. Aldo?
And Mike, the only thing I would add to that is that the governor took away parental choice. He allowed districts to decide when to go virtual. At the very beginning of the year in the road back plan, we were all required to be in person. But with outbreaks, we actually have to, outbreaks and or staff coverage issues, we actually have to communicate with the executive county superintendent and also the Monmouth County Department of Health.
Hi. Forgive me, I'm just trying to understand, Mr. Bullen. So the 24-hour period, like the links that need to be set up, is that like, are they individual per student, or is it like for a class, like for each class? Is it one link per class, or for each student that needs to be added to it? Is it a complete set of files?
it's a link for the student to remote into the class. So it would be one link because the students would typically, if it's a Google Meet, they would be shared with that Meet link.
But hypothetically, like if there's already children that are remote in the classroom, the link already exists, it would just be a matter of emailing it.
A matter of posting it. I'm sorry.
No, I'm asking.
Okay.
I don't know.
So it's not only a matter of the link, which you're correct. It would essentially, the link would be posted in Google Classroom if it's a Google Meet link. But there are also instructional materials that perhaps need to be uploaded for specific students. So in order to cater to the individual needs of every one of our students, which we know we do, we don't just put out assignments that are, teaching to the whole at times. At times there are specific assignments for specific students. So we want to make sure that the students are prepared and the teachers have ample time to get those assignments up.
Okay, all right, thanks for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a question? Scared to turn my mic on.
My mic. Oh, sorry. Go.
Sorry. I just had a quick question. Maybe I'm too close. I don't know.
I think it was.
I don't
just
know.
go. It's all good.
So if a child, just because I'm not sure, if a child is going to get tested, is that part of their 24-hour while they wait, or is it only during isolation or quarantine? Just out of curiosity. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, say I take my kid tomorrow to go get tested. Can he or she go virtual the following day? Do I have to wait that 24
So
hours? Does that make sense?
each specific, it makes sense, but I think there are a lot of variables that could possibly play in here. Typically, or all the time, what we do is we engage our school nurses. So the school nurses are engaged in a conversation about, let's say, onset of symptoms or the date of testing, the date of the result of the test. There are a lot of different scenarios that could come into play. But so without working in absolutes right now, because we could have a lot of different scenarios, in consultation with the school nurse, at that point, the school nurse makes a determination based on symptoms, testing, test results, and then once that determination is made at the school level that the child qualifies for remote instruction, the 24-hour clock begins.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, Vin?
Okay, next up is Mrs. Annette Seward.
Annette Seward, 18 Nashua Drive. Congratulations to the new board members. Congratulations to our new president and vice president. Dr. Hibbs, sorry you got the vids. I'm sure you did everything in your power to avoid getting sick. I know your family and yourself are vaccinated and you follow mask protocols, and unfortunately, you still couldn't escape the inevitable. Thank God that the virus has come down to a 0.000004 survival rate, so I think you'll be okay. I have actually a response for our first speaker tonight, although he was supposed to be addressing the board, and apparently he addressed the Facebook cyberbullies. My square that my kids fit in isn't the same square that your kids fit in. So I am not fighting and cyberbullying online for no reason. The lawsuits are coming. The kids are going to leave the schools, and your funding will be affected. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This isn't my opinion. This is fact, and unfortunately, this is the new science. I love Meet the Robinsons. It's one of my favorite. I'm like a Disney freak. But I don't know if you remember, when he goes into the future, he messes everything up. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned about why he needs to keep moving forward, because he realizes his presence belongs in one place. And this presence does not belong in my home. What goes on in school and what goes on in my home is the reason why we need to speak up on Facebook and find each other, because what's been going on for the last 3 years is becoming unacceptable. And the mama bears and the papa bears are coming. And this is going to change everything for you guys. So I hope that you're ready for a new year. Happy New Year's. I think that you need to open your eyes to the fact that what has gone on in the past is not going to be the future anymore. Thank you.
Vin, next.
Next up, Mr. Andrew McCormick. Okay.
Next one.
Mr. Adriel Grant.
Good evening to the board, president, superintendent, and members of our community. My name's Adriel Grant. I'm 14. I live at 8 Sudbury Road, Morganville, New Jersey. So first, according to Black Law's Dictionary, 11th edition, Roman and Civil Law, the definition of a mandate is a commission or contract by which one person, the mandator, requests someone, the mandatory, to perform a service gratuitously, the commission becoming effective when the mandatory agrees. Therefore, if the mandatory does not agree, the mandate is null. Serving members of the community, as you leave this building today, please take a moment, slow down, and observe your mask reflection in the nearest mirror. As you see the reflection of your face covered with the masks, remember that what you see has absolutely nothing to do with the safety or serving of the community. All it is a form of obedience and submissive training and conditioning, same as the likes of dog leash utilized to train an animal to serve its master. In terms to COVID regulations, according to United States Code 18, Section 2331, the term domestic terrorism means activities that involve acts dangerous to human life that are a violation of criminal laws of the United States or of any state, appear to be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population and to influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion. My generation will not be conditioned into submissiveness by any master. If you as professionals decide to willingly be conditioned into submissiveness by the state, that's your choice. But rest assured, we will be questioning every regulation and protocol implemented by the board. I'll protect myself, my little sisters, my family and friends from any potential wrongdoing at any level, at any place, including here. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to look in the mirror.
Okay. Vin?
Next up is Mrs. Diana Grant.
Good evening, Dr. Hibbs and board members. Happy New Year to everybody. An email was sent from the Marlboro Township Public Schools dated 12/31/21, stated that our district has been unnecessarily quarantining an exceedingly high number of students. Only 1.46% of these students tested positive for COVID, which means approximately 1,700 students, including my kids, were unnecessarily quarantined, and that is unacceptable. Well, I have some numbers too. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Investigation looked at the transmission of the common cold, which is the most prevalent illness of humans that has been around since the early history. This study determined that 42% of participants that were exposed to infection secretions developed cold. That's 42%. They also concluded that the fact is that there's such frequent repetitions of the cold suggests that there is little or no immunity to reinfections. In another article from Medscape, which offers the latest medical news worldwide, an associate professor of the Division of Infectious Diseases explained the prevalence of rhinovirus, the most predominant cause of the common cold. He explained that those who attend school are the most common reservoirs of rhinovirus infection, and the highest rates of transmission occur in crowded conditions such as found in schools. And in fact, 70 to 80% of persons exposed to the virus will experience some forms of symptoms. The numbers are right there in front of us. There's no need to put our children through testing and quarantine. This is unacceptable. These are the years that help to shape who they are, and they need to enjoy them without unnecessary and unlawful mandates that are placed on them. And sitting children on the floor for social distancing so they could learn because there are not enough tables for everyone to sit at is not the solution. Let kids be free to learn and do your job by providing them with the proper education that they deserve. Thank you.
Vin?
Next up, Mr. Leo Davelman.
Good afternoon, everybody. Leo Davelman, 51 Buttonwood Drive. So first and foremost, I want to thank the young man who spoke a few minutes before me. You did an amazing job. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for being here. Thank you for saying so eloquently and in a public forum what so many of your peers say to each other. I understand that those of you guys who are educators, by nature of your position, don't actually get to hear what kids talk about between themselves. We as parents do. What they're saying is exactly what we warned you about over a year ago. Your credibility as educators and authority figures is down to nothing. At this point, if a teacher says 2 + 2 = 4, the kids look at each other and say, is that the same guy who said wear a mask for 2 years? He must be wrong, just by definition. Please consider that as you go forward. Credibility needs to be rebuilt not only with parents and the community that has such a fissure of trust, but also with the children. And that's probably a more important job for all of you to consider going forward for the district. I also want to thank Mr. Lenny Thor for coming down here. He's one of the many people I've invited to come down and state his opposing views, and I'm so glad he did, because hopefully here he can see that these are real parents and kids even, and folks with real concerns and differing points of view that aren't what they appear on the internet. Frankly, some of the most impactful conversations I've had here they don't ever happen at this microphone, because this isn't a conversation. They happen in the sidebar, they happen between the rows, they happen during the breaks and after the meeting. So hopefully Mr. Thor will stick around and we'll get some chats, get to know each other a little bit better. Other than that, everything we left off my last conversation up here with you guys still applies. You made your choices for your officers. Hopefully Mr. Heller and Ms. Branch can live up to the trust placed in them. Mr. Heller, I have to say that not even saying a few words for your own candidacy was not a good way to start, especially since you had a huge speech prepared for what you knew was the outcome of the election. Hopefully, again, you will consider the communication with the community and all the trust that has to be repaired as you go about your work. Mr. Carvalho, I know you're new to your role. The fact that 2 board members had their hands raised continuously, but you could not see because you're not facing them and you didn't know to look, led to the fact that 2 people on the screen who also cannot see, I'm not blaming you guys, got to yell out nominations first. You got to only do the roll call for people whose nomination was yelled out first. And therefore, none of the other board members present ever actually had to vote against the candidates that they were voting against. That's a problem. That's something they should have had to do. So hopefully a learning moment. I'm not going to have enough time to talk about the other major topics, so for the second public comment session. Thank you, guys.
Vin?
Sure. Next up, Mr. John Rosato. No? Okay.
The next
Next up, Mr. Angelo Del Guidice. No? Okay.
Next then?
Next up, Mrs. Lisa Nabolsi.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Nabolsi, 181 Nantucket Place, and president of the Marlboro Educational Foundation. I would just like to say thank you to the current Board of Ed members and the retiring Board of Ed members. I'm grateful to you for everything that you've done and everything that you continue to do during this especially difficult time that we're in. I specifically want to say thank you to Robin Wolf for her years of dedication to the children of Marlboro. She's an amazing woman who not only served as the president of the Board of Education, but is a dedicated trustee on the Marlboro Educational Foundation, a beloved teacher, and a wonderful mother. I speak on behalf of the MEF to say thank you for your years of service.
Vin?
Okay, next up, Mrs. Kathleen DePasquale.
Kathleen DePasquale, Marlboro Township. First, Happy New Year to all of you. I'm glad to see some new faces. You know, congratulations on your role as president, although obviously a large portion here are not happy about it. Quite personally, I've been in education for over 19 years myself, half my time in high school and in college, half in public and half in private, and the latter part just finishing up a semester. What's happening to our education system is quite a disaster. And everything that the board has allowed to just slip in is causing so much damage, and none of you want to acknowledge it. You just keep going on and passing the political stuff. And now I know the first speaker said, you know, this is not political. This is so political, because you're standing on two sides of a fence here. Either you're living in the fear and you're allowing COVID to take over the entire education system. You should look up Reimagine Education. Read a little bit up about that, okay? Because it's happening right now, because, you know, to destroy a nation, you have to do it through the kids. And, you know, subservience of the mask, not giving proper educations. By the way, using IXL on a regular basis is pretty much a curriculum, and you're replacing live instruction with a computer. You know, the implementation of all this stuff has just been insane. Now, real quick, and I'm sure I'm gonna have to speak a little bit more, someone had asked about whether or not there was a link where you can just log on for virtual at any time. And Mr. Malone has acknowledged that, you know, it is one link, but we don't want to provide the link because we want to make sure we could upload the tangible work for the student. So what I'm hearing is you'd rather the student lose out on the live instruction because you don't actually have the hard material, which, you know, if there's a lesson going on, child could still following along, but instead, kid has to miss the first 24 hours, will eventually get the worksheets, and then has to figure out the worksheets without actually having the instruction, in addition to moving on the next day of a lesson that's built on the foundations from the day before. So, you know, that whole policy of waiting 24 hours is just insane. You just cause more damage. Also, Mr. Malone, you did forward me my emails about the policies, except for you sent it to me in a Google document that I had to log on my personal Google account, and it told me I wasn't able to share it.
1 minute.
So I'm asking that you please resend it to my personal email in a non-coded way of accessing the information of the policies. And Mr. Hibbs, I'm waiting for a lot of responses still from you, since the only thing you addressed was the policies. And I have heard back from Mr. Apollone, which I'll speak to about a little bit more later, and I'm still waiting for the reply just for a clarification on some information there. Congratulations.
Vin?
Yep, that's it for first public comment on the list.
Thank you, everyone, for their comments. I do appreciate it wholeheartedly. And if you do want to have a conversation after, I want to engage that, okay? So that's what I want to say with that. If we can move forward, organization matters. Jill?
The superintendent of schools submits the following resolutions
for approval. 1, attendance officer. 2, affirmative action officer, school and classroom practices. 3, affirmative action officer, employment practices. 4, district section 504 coordinator. 5, meeting schedule. 6, committee of the whole and regular public meeting dates. 7, form of agenda, workshop meeting. 8, form of agenda, regular meeting. I so move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Jen, second? Jen is second. Any comments? Roll call, please, Vinny.
Mrs. Amster?
Yes.
Mrs. Branch?
Yes.
Mr. Petruno?
Yes.
Ms. Piernick?
Yes.
Mrs. Shrem?
Yes.
Ms. Rosato?
Yes.
Mrs. Salaci?
Yes.
Mrs. Strafasi?
Yes.
And Dr. Heller?
Yes. We're going to move on to financial and business operation matters. Jen, please.
The superintendent of schools submits the following resolutions for approval. 1, banking institution signatories. 2, approval of depositories. 3, petty cash accounts. 4, authorized signatures. Oh, goodness. Sorry. I so move.
Do I have a second?
I second.
I'll second.
Jill? I'll got Jill first. Roll call. Does anybody have any comments? Then roll call, please.
Mrs. Amster?
Yes.
Mrs. Branch?
Yes.
Mr. Petruno?
Yes.
Ms. Piernick?
Yes.
Mrs. Shrem?
Yes.
Mrs. Rosato?
Yes.
Mrs. Strafasi?
Yes.
Mrs. Salaci?
Yes.
And Dr. Heller?
Yes. We're going to move on to policy development and community relations matters. Kathleen, please.
The superintendent of schools submits the following resolution for approval. 1, governance manual. 2, code of ethics. I so move.
Do I have a second? Jen is second. Any comments, questions? No. Vin, if you could take a roll call, please.
Mr. Zidmer, would you like to present now or after roll call? Okay,
Let's do roll call first,
Okay.
and then we'll go.
Roll call vote. Mrs. Strafasi?
Yes.
Mrs. Branch?
Yes.
Dr. Heller?
Yes.
Mr. Petruno? Mr. Petruno?
Yes.
Ms. Piernick?
Yes.
Mrs. Shrem?
Yes.
Mrs. Rosato?
Yes.
Mrs. Salaci?
Yes.
And Mrs. Amster?
Yes.
We're going to move on to more specifically. You're going to do your presentation?
Mr. Zidmer is going to do presentation, the annual presentation of the School Ethics Act and Code of Ethics.
Thank you, Vin.
Thank you.
You have enough?
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Members of the board, members of the community, thank you for having me here to speak about this important topic. We're going to discuss the School Ethics Act. It's an important law contained in Title 18A, which is the education statutes of the state of New Jersey. It essentially prescribes the do's and don'ts, the ethical do's and don'ts for school officials. And I've handed out to you a copy of the School Ethics Act, which includes in it the Code of Ethics for board members. So, in the preamble to the School Ethics Act, our legislature has explained why we have the act, why we have this law that, again, prescribes the do's and don'ts for board members. And what it says is that in our representative form of government, it's essential that the conduct of members of local boards of education and local school administrators hold the respect and the confidence of the people. The officials must avoid conduct which is in violation of the public trust or which creates a justifiable impression among the public that such trust is being violated. And what that essentially means is that the community, the public, has to respect and trust that what you're doing is in the best interests of the Marlboro School District, the children of the district, and not in your own best personal or financial interests. And I always advise board members, not only do you have to avoid actual conflicts of interest, voting on matters where you have a direct personal or financial interest, but you also have to avoid the appearance of impropriety. And what that means is that if there's some doubt about whether you should vote on a particular item because your integrity, your ethics, and so forth could be questioned, I always advise that you should abstain, present, not voting, that sort of thing, instead of voting where the public will lose confidence that you're doing something for, again, your own personal interests and not the interests of the school district. So who does the Act apply to? The Act applies not only to board members, this may surprise some folks, but it also applies to what's been defined as school officials. It includes members of the board, employees or officers of the New Jersey School Boards Association, as well as high-level school administrators. I just lost my presentation there. Thank you. There we go. Okay. The remote is not working now. There we go. Got it. Thank you. So the Code of Ethics within the Ethics Act, which you have here that I've handed out to everybody, that only applies to Board of Education members. Other key terms in the School Ethics Act that you should be aware of are member of immediate family, that is defined as a spouse or dependent of a school official living in the same household. And then you have relatives, which also includes spouses, natural or adopted children, parents or siblings of a school official. And so the reason that there's a little bit of a distinction in the law, there's greater conflicts generally when it comes to members of the immediate family than relatives. When they talk about children under the definition of relatives, what they're talking there is emancipated children, children that are grown up presumably, that don't live in your household, and so forth. Siblings of board members, parents of board members. There's less of a conflict generally when it comes to relatives. And by way of just brief example, in the world of negotiations, if a Board of Education member has a husband or wife who's a teacher, for instance, in another school district, the board member, that's an immediate family member, that board member is completely conflicted from participating in the negotiations process with the local union if their immediate family member is also in the union in another school district. If, by way of example, a board member has a sister in another district, that's a relative. There is generally no conflict in the board member participating in negotiations in that scenario. So that's an example to show that, again, with members of immediate family under the Ethics Act, generally the conflict is considered greater. So the School Ethics Act is essentially broken down into two parts. You have the prohibited acts, or the conflicts of interests. That's matters where board members should not vote, like I mentioned before, on issues where they have a personal, direct, business, financial, personal, or other type of involvement in the matter. And then you have the Code of Ethics, which I'll talk about now. It's also codified in Board Policy 0142. So there's many Code of Ethics provisions, and I'm not, by highlighting some, suggesting that some are more important than others, but I do want to highlight some. And these are areas sometimes where board members get tripped up, and the decisions of the New Jersey School Ethics Commission can be found on the New Jersey Department of Education website. I've given citations throughout my presentation if you'd like to look some of the cases up. But Section B of the Code of Ethics says that you're to make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and you will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, color, sex, or social standing. You're here for all the kids, not just a select group of the kids. Next, Section C. And Section C really defines what the role of a board member is. And I think a lot of times members in the community are confused about what is the actual role of a board member. What do board members do? And the answer is that the board is a policy-making body. And what the Code of Ethics says is that board members are to confine their board action to policy-making, setting policy, and we use Strauss-Esme that develops the framework of our policies, but we do have a lot of latitude when it comes to those policies to tailor them to suit the individual needs of the Marlboro School District. We also have regulations that are kind of the finer points of those policies as well. So you've got policy making, planning for the future of the district, and appraisal, taking a step back and saying, how are we doing? We've set goals for ourselves. We've set goals for the superintendent. We've set goals for the district. We've set goals for the board. At the end of the year, take a step back. Did we accomplish our goals? Appraisal. And then what it goes on to say is that you're supposed to help frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted with those who will be affected by them. And what we're talking about there is basically the work through our various committees. Board members shouldn't be doing their own investigations or taking private action, which I'll talk about later. You're only authorized to act at a duly convened meeting or through the various board committees. But you're supposed to obviously consult with those who are going to be affected by them. Typically that's done through the administration. Next. And this is an area where board members oftentimes get tripped up too. They kind of blur the line between the board-making role, which is a policy-making role, and administration. Board members are not administrators. You're not to be involved in the day-to-day operations of the school district. And what Section D says, you will carry out your responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with your fellow board members to see that they are well run. You do not run the day-to-day operations of the district. Your job is to make sure through the administration that the district is functioning properly. And so the Ethics Act defines what somebody would have to show if they were going to file a complaint saying that a particular person violated, a particular board member or school official violated that section. So to show somebody violated that, you'd have to show that a board member gave direct orders to school personnel or became directly involved in activities or functions that are the responsibility of personnel, school personnel, or the day-to-day administration of the district. And this is an actual ethics case from 2005. You can read more about it. But in essence, the School Ethics Commission found that there was a violation of this particular section where a board member asked for copies of SAT reports directly from the guidance secretary, inspected the lockers, went into the locker rooms, told the phys ed teachers how they should be doing their jobs, instructed staff on supervision of students, was walking around the schools and that sort of thing. That's a clear example, a clear violation of a board member violating the administration of the schools. That's something that should be left to the school principal, the vice principal, superintendent, and so forth. Next. You are to recognize that your authority rests with the Board of Education, and you're not to make personal promises or take private action that could compromise the board. Like I said earlier, you have authority to act at a duly convened meeting through your various committees, but once you leave this room, you do not have the authority to bind the board, to take private action. You shouldn't be doing your own investigations and so forth. And the Code of Ethics says, the code itself says that to prove a violation of this provision, you'd have to show evidence that a board member made a personal promise or took action that was beyond the scope of his or her duties, such that by its nature it actually had the potential to compromise the board. It doesn't actually have to compromise the board. It's enough that what you did had the potential to compromise the board. Next. Section F, you're supposed to refuse to surrender your independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups or use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends. Like I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, you're here for all the children, you're here for all of the community, not surrendering your independent judgment to particular groups. Confidentiality is a big part of what board members have to understand and respect. As board members, you're going to come across a lot of confidential information involving personnel matters, confidential information involving student matters, confidential information about litigation, attorney-client privilege, and other issues that are confidential that the law allows us to discuss in closed session. And what the Code of Ethics says is that you're to hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools, which, if disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. And then in all other matters, you have to provide accurate information. So you don't lose your First Amendment rights as board members, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But when you speak, you do have to provide accurate information. And the confidentiality is such an important part of what a board member has to understand and respect. And I always tell the boards that I represent that if board members feel that what is discussed in closed session is not going to stay in closed session, it completely undermines the ability of the board to be an effective body, because people are going to be afraid to have healthy discussion, dialogue, and debate for fear that as soon as they get out of that room, everybody in the community is going to know what each particular board member said or discussed, or how they opined on a particular issue, and so forth. So again, I implore this board, in order to be a smooth, functioning, efficient body, to maintain that confidentiality, and the breach of which is a very, very serious ethics violation. Section I will support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. You are supposed to support and protect school personnel. You're not supposed to evaluate your administrators or publicly castigate your administrators. Does that mean you're not allowed to ask good questions? Of course it doesn't. You're allowed to ask good questions. Does that mean you're supposed to rubber stamp everything that comes your way? Of course not. You're allowed to inquire, and should inquire, about the decisions that you are being asked to make and things you're being asked to vote on. But you have to do it in a respectful, professional way. And so factual evidence of a violation of this code provision would include evidence that a board member took deliberate action which resulted in undermining, opposing, compromising, or harming school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. Section J, oftentimes you're approached by members of the community with concerns and complaints, and that's fine. They have a right to approach you. They voted you in, and they have your ear. But at the end of the day, what the Code of Ethics says is that you're supposed to take those complaints and not act on them yourselves and try to solve them yourselves. But the Code of Ethics says that you're supposed to refer all complaints to the chief school administrator, Dr. Hibbs, and he will act, and you're supposed to only act on those complaints at a public meeting after the failure, if there's a failure of an administrative solution. So I always say this is a good opportunity for board members to punt when you're in the local supermarket and somebody comes up to you and complains that their teacher is giving the child too much homework, or whatever the concern is, that you thank them for that concern, and you take that concern in their name and you bring it to Dr. Hibbs and explain what the issue is. And Dr. Hibbs, as he always does, will get back to them and respond in an appropriate manner. So who can file a complaint? If somebody believes the Ethics Act has been violated or the Code of Ethics has been violated, who can file an actual complaint against a board member? And the answer is that anybody can file a complaint against a board member alleging a violation of the conflict section or the Code of Ethics. However, there is a 6-month statute of limitations by which that complaint has to be filed, which means it has to be filed within 6 months of the time that the alleged violation took place. Now, it's important to note that New Jersey has an indemnification law. And what that law says is that whenever an action, and this would include an ethics complaint generally, whenever an action is brought against a board member for an act or omission arising out of the course of the performance of his or her duties as a member of the board is responsible for providing that board member with a defense, defraying costs, legal fees, and so forth, because the legislature felt that nobody would ever run for a Board of Education and volunteer if you could be sued, if you could be the subject of an ethics complaint and have to incur the expenses on your own in terms of legal fees. The board does carry insurance for these sorts of things and would appoint counsel to represent you. So I wanted you to be aware of that as well. So the School Ethics Commission, as I mentioned earlier, they are the entity, the agency in the state of New Jersey, and they're the only agency that can determine whether a particular board member or school official's conduct has violated the act. They are the only ones who could make that call. They are the only ones who could remove a board member, or some of the other penalties we'll talk about in a second. If a school official has a question about a particular course of action, can I engage in this particular course of action? Is this the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? You can certainly, through the board president, ask me. I've read most of the cases, and I'm pretty familiar with what the law is on this subject, and I'll certainly give you my opinion. But if you wanted something more formal, you can write to the School Ethics Commission, and they will issue an advisory opinion about the proposed course of conduct. And they actually publish most of their advisory opinions on their website. So if you Google New Jersey Department of Education, School Ethics Commission, you'll see all their advisory opinions that they've issued over the years. A lot of them you'll see pertain to negotiations and what board members can and can't do vis-a-vis negotiations. So what are the sanctions? What are the penalties for those who violate the School Ethics Act? Well, on the light end, you have a reprimand, which is a written letter from the School Ethics Commission to the board member or school official saying, you violated the act or you violated the code. You can't let this happen again, and it's a reprimand, it's a letter. Higher up on the scale is a censure. A censure is a resolution that's actually read at a public meeting admonishing the board member for the violation. Suspension, pretty obvious what that is. I've seen some of the suspensions handed down from the commission ranging from anywhere for 30 days to a year. And then lastly, removal of a board member for the most egregious violations. So I touched on this a little bit earlier. I want to elaborate a little bit. Board member First Amendment free speech issues. Board members don't waive their First Amendment rights by getting on the Board of Education. They have a right to and should express their opinions on issues involving the school district. However, there's some caveats. They can't disclose information which is inaccurate. We talked about that before. They can't disclose information which is confidential or which has the potential to compromise the board. So those are some of the limitations. And then lastly, we talked about supporting and protecting school personnel. So you're not allowed to publicly criticize or evaluate the staff and those sorts of things. So those are the main caveats that you have to be aware of when you talk about board member First Amendment issues. I've seen board members over the course of years in representing boards publicly come out against the school budget, for instance. Is that okay for a board member to say, I'm not supporting the budget? Yes, if a board member is not supporting the budget and they want to express to the community why they're not supporting the budget, that's absolutely their prerogative. The only thing is that they have to make sure that they're providing accurate information. So for instance, they can't say, I'm not supporting the budget next year because we're adding 20 new administrative positions when in fact the district's only adding 2. So it's important that what you say is true and accurate. The other thing that's important to understand outside the scope of a meeting is that when you speak about issues pertaining to the school district, whether that's in letters to the editor, whether if you're somebody who likes to use social media and that sort of thing, that you should not, must not represent your personal opinion as the position of the Board of Education, and you must include in all formal expressions in which your board affiliation is likely to be recognized, such as letters to the government officials, newspapers, speeches, etc., a statement that you're speaking, that while you're a member of the board, I'm sorry, but you're speaking as a private citizen. So you have to make it clear that while I'm a member of the board, I'm not speaking as a board member. I'm not speaking for the board, on behalf of the board. I'm speaking as a private citizen, and the opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent those of the Board of Education. And you have to use a disclaimer. And here's some model language that the School Ethics Commission recommends that board members include in tweets, again, letters to the editors, speeches, etc. And this is what they like to see. They like you to say the following statements are made in my capacity as a private citizen and not in my capacity as a board member. These statements are also not representative of the board or its individual members and solely represent my own personal opinions. If you put that on there, you'll generally be safe. So, as the board knows, every year I like to do a little bit of a quiz based on the latest decisions from the School Ethics Commission. And these are hard. These are hard cases. And my purpose in doing this is not to trip anybody up. I've read these cases, and I always sometimes am surprised by the answer. They're true falses, and I'll certainly help you out. But let's go through them, and I'll just, again, pick board members in no particular order. And again, this is not to embarrass anybody. These are hard questions, and certainly the new board members get a pass too. But we'll try to go through all these questions. And again, these are real cases. Go to the School Ethics Commission website, and you'll read more about them. Some of them are 15, 20 pages long. So what I've tried doing here is distilling a very long case involving sometimes multiple factors besides what I've put on here into a short little paragraph here. So I'll start with Ms. Schrem. the question is, this is a true or false. A board member violated Section I, and I'll refresh everybody's memory as to what that is. Section I of the Code of Ethics says that you will support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. And so here's the question. Just bear with me one second. So a board member violated Section I of the Code when he attributed the alleged poor reading results on teachers in lower grades by stating in a public board meeting, quote, "I know that the conversation started with high school ranking. We must look at what's coming to our high school. If we are not doing what we need to do at the lower levels, we're going to continue to get these results. Are they students that have been in Union, that was the name of the town, since kindergarten? That would indicate to me that there's something wrong with our teaching staff." And this upset some teaching staff, and they filed an ethics complaint against this board member and said, hey, you violated the section about supporting and protecting school personnel. So, Ms. Schrem, do you think this was true, a violation, or false, not a violation?
I think true, a violation.
Actually, it was not a violation, false. And what the Ethics Commission said was that the board member did not identify a single district teaching staff member by name or by grade level as being bad or the sole reason why student performance was stymied. The board member simply questioned what could possibly be driving the results of the educational outcomes for students in the district and cited quality of teaching performance as a possibility. So this was not deemed to be a violation. I think if the board member had called out individual teachers or administrators, I think the result would have been very different.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense.
Okay, so number 2, we'll go to Ms. Salachi. So in this case, a board member who is a deacon with a local church and received an annual $2,000 honorarium for his services violated C of the conflict section, and I'll remind you what that says. That says that no school official shall act in his official capacity in any manner where he, a member of his immediate family, or a business organization in which he has an interest, has a direct or indirect financial involvement that might reasonably be expected to impair his objectivity or independence of judgment. So the question is, did the board member who received a $2,000 stipend from his church violate Section C when he made a motion and then voted to accept the motion to approve his church's use of the district facilities? What do you think, Ms. Salachi? Do you think that was true, that that was a violation, or false, not a violation?
I think true.
You are correct. It was absolutely a violation. The board member should have abstained on that particular issue. The board member said, look, $2,000 is de minimis, it's not a lot of money. The School Ethics Commission quickly corrected him on that point and said, look, you as board members on your financial disclosure forms have to list any honorarium that are $250 or up. This was almost 10 times that amount, so for you to say that it was really a minimal amount is a little bit disingenuous, and it was considered to be a conflict of interest. Okay. We'll move on to the next one. I will call on Ms. Piernick. Number 3, a board member violated Section J, and I'll read what that says. J says you're to refer all complaints to the chief administrative officer and act on those complaints at a public meeting only after the failure of an administrative solution. So a board member violated Section J. And by the way, there's a lot of school ethics cases out there on board members' use of social media. So a board member violated Section J of the code when he served as an administrator for a watchdog Facebook group where some community members routinely bashed the district's business administrator and made negative comments about the superintendent as well. The complaint alleged that the board member at issue had complete control over the editorial content of the Facebook page and should have taken action to stop it, should have been more involved, and that sort of thing. So do you think that that was a violation of Section J?
False.
Correct, false. It was not a violation of Section J. They said that if you look at the language of Section J, there was nothing for them to refer complaints to in this particular case. And I think, to be honest with you, the person who filed this complaint probably cited the wrong provision of the Code of Ethics. Again, maybe the outcome perhaps would have been different if they cited Section I, which is supporting and protecting school personnel. not sure, maybe the outcome would have been different on this case. Okay, next. We'll go to Mr. Petruno. A board member violated Section B of the Ethics Act, and that's on page 1. I'll read that to everybody. No school official shall use or attempt to use his official position to secure unwarranted privileges, advantages, or employment for himself, members of immediate family, or others. So, true or false, a board member violated that provision of the Ethics Act and the Code of Ethics by making a motion to change Columbus Day on the district calendar to Indigenous Peoples Day, stating that her vote was due in part to the good example that she wanted to set for her child. Do you think that is a true or false, Mr. Petruno?
I'm going to go with false.
You are correct. False. And what the School Ethics Commission held was interesting, and I'll quote from the decision. It says, as a general matter, board members are oftentimes guided by their own personal opinions and beliefs about a particular issue or cause, and unless their conduct or action exceeds the scope of their authority or is otherwise unethical, which is not the case here, board members are free to do so. So you're allowed to say that, you know, I'm being guided by my own personal opinion, I want to set a good example, and that sort of thing. This was not a violation. Okay, good job, we're doing well. Next one, we'll go to Ms. Rosado. A superintendent violated Section B of the Ethics Act, and I'll read that again. That was the same provision that a school official using or attempting to use his official position to secure unwarranted privileges, advantages, or employment for himself, members of his immediate family, or others. So here's this one. The superintendent allegedly violated Section B of the Ethics Act when he became aware of the presence of extra COVID vaccines within the community and did not inform the union of the availability of the vaccines and instead, quote, reserved himself a vaccine dose and only informed a few individuals of his choosing of the additional doses. And again, these are allegations. Keep that in mind. But the claim was that that was a violation of Section B. What do you think?
True.
It was actually false, and to be honest with you, I would have come down the same way that you did on that. Just reading the facts, it seems like the superintendent was using his position to kind of secure an unwarranted privilege or advantage, but what the School Ethics Commission said was they were kind of hung up on the fact that he didn't have an obligation, a legal or an ethical obligation to inform the union about the availability of these extra vaccines, and they found that it was not a violation, and they didn't have enough facts in the case to establish that it was. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Dr. Heller, number 6. An executive director of a charter school violated Section A of the School Ethics Act, which says that no school official or member of his immediate family shall have an interest in a business organization or engage in any business transaction or professional activity which is in substantial conflict with the proper discharge of his duties in the public interest. So the question is, and by the way, charter schools are also in New Jersey subject to the Ethics Act. An executive director of a charter school violated Section A of the Act when she posted a Black Lives Matter heart-shaped logo and statement on the school's website endorsing the Black Lives Matter organization. Do you think that that was a violation, true, or not a violation, false?
I believe it was a violation. True?
No, they said it was not a violation. Basically, they said that there was no facts to allege that the executive director had an interest in a business organization or engaged in any business transaction involving Black Lives Matter that was in substantial conflict with his or her duties. So it was not deemed to be a violation. Okay, number 7. Go to Ms. Amster. I'm sorry, number 8, I apologize. A board member violated, did I skip one? Ooh, I gave you the answer, but hopefully you didn't see it. Okay, a board member violated sections E, F, and G of the code. E is the section that says, E is that you will recognize that your authority rests with the board and you will make no personal promises or take private action that could compromise the board. F is that you're supposed to refuse to surrender your independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups. And G is confidentiality and providing accurate information. So this is a true or false. There you are. A board member violated those sections of the code when he, along with township officials, distributed a flyer, seemingly only to those believed to be of Indian descent, requesting that they vote for candidates in the 2019 Democratic primary election bracketed under the slogan, Middlesex County Democratic Organization. The flyer mentioned, among other things, that the persons named in the flyer support South Asian persons and culture, and stated the opponent of the group was a leader of a radical group. The board member signed the flyer, and the signature included his picture with the words Board of Education, but there was no disclaimer on the flyer. Do you think that's a violation? Yes. It clearly was a violation. Board members are allowed to endorse candidates. The only thing is, like I said before, you need to have that endorsement on there saying that you're speaking as a private citizen and you're not speaking on behalf of the Board of Education. Okay, Ms. Branch. A board member violated sections I and G of the code, and I is supporting and protecting school personnel, and G, I think I have these memorized by now. G is holding confidentiality and providing accurate information. So a board member violated those code provisions when she shared a post on her personal Facebook page that casted the complainant, who served as a substitute teacher employed by the board at the time, in a negative light. Namely, the post alleged that the substitute was removed from her position as a sub in the district as a result of unspecified misconduct. Do you think that that is a true or a false?
I would say true.
True, you're correct. And so that's a primary example of a board member not supporting and protecting school personnel by basically making disparaging statements. Perhaps the board member learned about the substitute's dismissal in a closed session discussion implicating the confidentiality provision and so forth. So again, a clear example of a violation.
Mark?
Yes?
So to go back to an earlier example that you used, when it was a general statement, it wasn't necessarily in violation, but because this is looking at a specific teacher, is that the main point of differentiation here?
Yes, that's exactly the differentiating point. So here they were talking about a particular substitute who I think they actually identified on the Facebook page too, whereas the other statement in the other example was just more of a general statement questioning teaching performance. Like I said earlier, I think if that first case where the board member questioned teaching performance had called out particular teachers, I definitely think there would have been a violation in that particular case. Okay? So go, Ms. Safachi. I'm sorry? Oh, okay. There's no penalties for getting wrong answers. A board member violated Section B of the Act, and just to refresh your memory, no school official shall use or attempt to use his official position to secure unwarranted privileges, advantages, or employment for himself, members of immediate family, or others. A board member violated Section B of the Act when she voted to approve a resolution acknowledging that the superintendent had completed a merit goal. The board member's child was employed in the district as a teacher. As such, at the time of the vote, the superintendent had supervisory authority over the board member's child. Do you think that was a violation, or do you think the board member should have abstained? True, a violation. False, not a violation. In this particular case, it was an it was a relative, not an immediate family member. But I wouldn't get hung up on that. Yes. But that's okay, you can overthink.
I mean, he should have abstained, so but that doesn't mean, I'm gonna say false, but I think he should have abstained.
So then say true. So you said true, right?
He should, if it were me, I would have abstained, so.
He should have abstained. So, the example I gave before about negotiations maybe was confusing a little bit. That had to do with relatives who were not in the same school district. In this particular case, the board member's child was employed in the same school district. So whenever your relative or immediate family member works in the same school district as the board member has to abstain on anything having to do, obviously, with their own child, but everybody up the chain of command all the way to the superintendent. So you can't vote on the superintendent's merit pay, evaluation, and so forth. You can't vote on the principal's merit pay, not merit pay, but performance evaluation, increments, that sort of thing. So it's an absolute conflict of interest when a board member has a relative or immediate family member in the same school district.
I have a question about that, really
Sure.
quick. Just just in the era of blended families. So how does it work with like a former spouse, or you marry and there's a man, you know, there's stepchildren, but they're adults? Like, have there?
Yeah,
has that
stepchildren would be
come up?
considered relatives generally. A former spouse, if you're divorced, that person's no longer your spouse, but you know, nothing's black and white in the law, as you know. So if the board member is receiving, for instance, child support or alimony, there's some still connection. Like I said at the beginning of the presentation, for something like that, I would err on the side of caution. The appearance of impropriety, even though it may not be an actual conflict, I would advise the board member in that particular case to abstain. Okay? And we've got one final slide. I'll save this for Dr. Hibbs if he's up to it, since we've got 10. And we
I'm
only
up to
have-
it.
All
I
right,
got
good.
it.
So how about this one, Dr. Hibbs? A board member violated Section E of the code. In this case, really blew my mind, I'll tell you, in terms of, you know, what were they thinking. This says that you're going to recognize that your authority rests with the Board of Education and will make no personal promises or take private action that could compromise the board. So in this particular case, the allegation is that a board member violated Section E of the code when he posted on his Facebook page many anti-Muslim sentiments, including a picture of Congresswoman Omar wearing a hijab and referring to her as, quote, terrorist 100%. In another post, he shared a photo of a doll, it was a Barbie doll, dressed in a hijab. The doll appears to be a woman, has a black eye and a bruise on its chin, and the text under the photo stated, Sharia Barbie comes with hijab, bruises, and Quran. Stoning accessories available for additional purchase. Dr. Hibbs, is that a violation of Section E?
I would think that completely compromised the board, so I would say that is absolutely true, Mr. Zittimer.
You are absolutely correct. And, you know, a lot of times the School Ethics Commission doesn't hear these cases. They refer them to administrative law judges to engage in a fact-finding process. And I thought the language from the administrative law judge in this case was excellent. I just wanted to read it real quick, and then I'll finish up. The judge said, quote, it's not a stretch to consider that students or families of students of the Muslim faith may fear that their culture or faith may play a role in adverse decisions by the board based on the respondent's public expression of negative attitudes towards Muslim culture and faith. Furthermore, they may well be discouraged from even asking or seeking redress to the board if they feel there's no point. The judge contended that, quote, this is clearly an example of conduct that would cause members of the board to lose the confidence and respect of the people and creates an unjustifiable impression that such trust is being violated. Well said. Does anybody have any questions about anything I discussed this evening? Sir. I was referring to Aldo. Go ahead.
So the SEC, who exactly is that made up of?
Sure, great question. So the School Ethics Commission is made up of current and sitting school administrators. There are superintendents who sit on the School Ethics Commission. They have an executive director who's appointed, I believe, by the governor. They're comprised of about a dozen or so individuals. They have attorneys who sit on the School Ethics Commission. The Deputy Attorney General sits and advises them, and I think there's also an official from the New Jersey Department of Education. Good question. Somebody else have a question on the screen? Susie, was that you or?
It's Tricia.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So social media in our community is used a lot. The Marlboro Facebook community page. There's a lot of dialogue on that. I don't comment ever on anything, and I just, you know, we've had conversations about social media and weighing in. Can you just talk about pros and cons or your recommendation about commenting on discussions on social media, specifically Facebook pages or other, just any social media in general?
So if you're asking my personal opinion, I'm really not a big fan of board members doing that. I think that I've read so many cases where board members who are well-intentioned end up getting tripped up and saying things that they shouldn't have said. Again, oftentimes inadvertently, breaching confidentiality, forgetting to have the disclaimer on there, speaking about board issues that are preliminary, in progress, you know, advisory, and that sort of thing. Oftentimes, I think board members forget that the board president is the spokesperson for the Board of Education. So board members really have to be careful about responding to inquiries that are really best directed to the superintendent in a lot of cases as the chief school administrator. Like I said, the board president is the spokesperson for the board. But most importantly, you have to make it clear, and I'm talking like every post, not just at the top of the thread, that you are speaking as an individual and you are not speaking for the Board of Education, just so there's absolutely no confusion whatsoever. But you do have a right to respond to your constituents, and if that's the way you want to do it, but just be super mindful of the ethical limitations that I talked about this evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe we're going to move to our second public comments. Yes? Okay.
So I had no one signed up on the list, but you're welcome to open it up to the public if they'd like to speak.
We have.
There it is.
We have. Okay.
Sorry, Mrs. DiPasquale.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, first up, Mrs. Kathleen DiPasquale.
Mark, will you share that with everybody? Oh, thank you.
Kathleen DePasquale, Marlboro Township. Just to pick up, so I just in telling you, Mr. Heller, I have been in contact with Mr. Apollone, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, about the discussion of the substitute rates. Last meeting, I very specifically asked for the percentile that the district was sitting in with their new adjusted rate. Also noting that the rate that you guys are discussing is an actual over 30% increase, of which you're going to be paying an outside agency a 30% finder's fee just for placing a sub in the district, and that could be an immense amount of money just not going to the people it needs to go to. So anyway, Mr. Apollone has replied back to me with the median. Now, statistically speaking, a median tells you much of nothing. It really depends on outliers, and there's a lot of things. So I have asked for the percentile, and I was told he did not have the data of the entire state. I have replied back. I can share this email with you as well. I'm awaiting to find out what mean and standard deviation that was used in the number of districts that were used to get your information. So that's looking for that clarification. Mr. Zittimer, I'm sorry. You presented a slide tonight that stated, the board is a policy-making, planning, appraisal, and help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them. Does this also apply to the general public? Because many of these policies that are being passed actually have quite substantial things against the constituents of the town. So, the civility policy, I know that was just amended in August of 2021, added on new subsets categories, and one of them is burdens the staff or others with repeated telephone calls, excessive written communication, and or face-to-face confrontations, or speaks or writes to a staff member in a manner that is disrespectful or excessively confrontational. Well, first of all, I ask a lot of questions all the time, and many of my questions are unanswered, and I know the board has received, over the course of my time from 2018 to 2021, I had actually put in questions explaining my whole thing. So, with the civility policy, I know I brought this up before, but is there a civility policy for the administration, such as the superintendent and the assistant superintendent? And because it's almost like rules for thee, but not for me, is it reasonable to think that a parent can't ask questions about their child's care, physical care, and accurate record keeping? Other things. What happens when a policy is actually broken? Who investigates this and carries out those things? And if there is no policy for civility for the superintendent or any of the administration, I'd like to propose that the board start discussing creating a policy for them. Also, I would appreciate responses. You guys just completely ignore me every single time. And it's very selective on what you choose to answer with. So can I get a promise that, you're going to have an open communication with the community and actually respond to questions and follow up on questions, as opposed to having us voice our concerns and you want an open communication, but you just keep ignoring us? Thank you.
I don't know if that was directed to me or part of
I'm speaking, I'm looking at Mr. Heller.
Doctor.
It's all good. I hear you, and I'm listening, and I will confer with other individuals, other than myself.
Can I expect a response to the many questions I've asked tonight and previous
I have
nights?
to explore and investigate.
Okay, I can send you exact timestamps on videos
no,
so you can hear the exact questions.
We're not gonna go back and forth, but what I'll do is I'll talk to you afterwards. Fair
Okay,
enough?
sounds great.
Fair enough? Okay, thank you. Does anybody want to respond?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of consulting with the community, which is a fair question, the public participation portion of our meetings are the board's way of hearing from our constituents. And as you know, Marlboro actually has 2 public participation sessions at every meeting. Most of my clients actually only have 1. So Marlboro's, I'll say, more generous when it comes to getting public input, than a lot of school districts. Can somebody turn off their mics? I'm getting a lot of feedback here. Thanks. It's all right. That's how we get public input. You have a right to weigh in on policies. They're on the agendas. You can certainly speak at the mic as you do. But I think sometimes there's confusion here that these meetings are somehow a town hall and that it's a back and forth and a debate and an opportunity for members of the community to come up and interrogate the board and administration and get 50 questions answered. That's really not what the public participation session is for. It's an opportunity for the public to come up to the microphone and weigh in. You have a couple questions that you want answered, that's fair. But to come up here sometimes, and I'm not singling you out, but I've seen it happen in a lot of places where people come up to the microphone with a dozen questions and they expect them answered all at the meeting, I just don't think is a fair and reasonable request. If the board wants to have a town hall type back and forth discussion, they can do that. That's certainly their prerogative. Some districts do it, others don't, most don't, but that's something that could happen. But that is really not the purpose of this meeting. This is a board meeting, a meeting of the Board of Education to conduct the business of the board. So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you very much, Mark. Vinny, can you please, next person?
Sure. Next up is Mr. Moishe Grant.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Hibbs, and members of our community. Moshe Grant, 8 Sudbury Road, Morganville, New Jersey. Mr. Hibbs, I hope you feel better soon. I appreciate the time and effort you took to type a reply to my email that I sent earlier this week. I assure you a proper reply to your message will be registered in timely fashion. In the interim, I still stand in my request of every one of the members of this board to produce proper due diligence submittals related to the information I requested. Mr. Hibbs, the wishes and wants of those in our community with different opinions are completely respected by me and any like-minded member of our community, yet their opinions cannot legally be imposed on our children in any discriminatory way. Mr. Hibbs, your justification of the board's decision based on published CDC and DHO recommendations and data is pretty much null and void, as it's not applicable. Simple being is that they are the suggestion, while the people on this board are the implementing, and their data is not complete. It's the board's responsibility as the implementer in this case to provide sufficient information to be applicable for a proper receival of all information needed for an informed consent. The information provided by the CDC and DOH is not complete. It's nowhere close to being informative enough to produce an educated consent. Your argument on that email that no schools are doing such due diligence is completely misleading as well, as the actions of thousands of schools and boards of ed throughout the nation suggests and proves exactly the opposite. While your email might help easing some concerns within the group of board members right over here, we will question absolutely every one of your actions as long as any form of discriminatory actions against our children are in place. And I assure you that this easy feeling that came after your email within this board is very, very short-lived. Soon enough, there will be many questions that will need proper answers, and the members of this board will have proper explanation to do. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening, and I hope you feel better soon.
Vinny?
I have no one else on the list.
Okay, thank you. Could we have them sign in?
Yeah, they can just say their name at the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Whatever.
Name and
works.
address at the microphone.
Just one at a
Yep.
time, please.
Good evening, Sarah Chrysler, 2 Carriage Court. I have just a couple of questions. I'm not going to pepper everyone with questions, but that is why we're here, and this is our opportunity to speak to the board. So I think that's really important to understand. My first question is for Mr. Zittimer. I'd like to know if a Board of Ed member made a special request for a certain teacher for their child and other students in that class, would that be against the ethics, any of the ethics that you went over today? So that's my first. I'll finish and then you can chime in. At the last meeting, this is for Dr. Hibbs and I guess Dr. Heller. At the last meeting, the budget was proposed to extend to the full 2%. I think it was mentioned by Dr. Hibbs, I could be wrong, but somebody mentioned that if we didn't go to the full 2%, something like class sizes being larger could be a fallout from not going to the full 2%. My question is, I think we went to 2% last year, so I just want clarification. So my child has 33 kids in her 5th grade class. I'd like to know how much bigger than 33 children one teacher can accommodate and where you would put them, like the cafeteria, or how that could be worked on, because I think 33 kids is an awful lot, especially since we went to the full 2% last year, as I believe we did. And lastly, Dr. Hibbs, I do hope you're feeling better too. COVID's no fun. Nobody wants anybody to be sick. But I would like to know, I don't want any health status, I just would like to know why the other 3 board members are not here in person. It's not fair that the public doesn't have the same opportunity for, say, if I had COVID, you certainly wouldn't want me here, but I would like to participate. I think that's a fair request, and I'm not sure why we have done away with that, other than the fact that it's not as easy for the district to accommodate and handle. I know it was wild and crazy, but everybody else wants to participate in the meeting. I shouldn't have to send my neighbor with my comments to come and speak to you. Thank you.
Let me just briefly address the question about the 2%. I honestly don't recall mentioning class sizes. If I recall the conversation, and I think Mr. Caravello controlled the entire budget presentation, so Vin, please weigh in. I think the conversation that really we've been having is that going way less than 2% would put in jeopardy the concept of air conditioning. 33 is higher than we would like, absolutely, in the district. You know, I'd have to look and see specifically what class that was. It's definitely not our norm, but we do have pockets where we unfortunately do have higher class sizes, and going less than 2% certainly wouldn't help that. But I don't recall saying that. And then I think the conversations we've had would be less than 2% would really affect the air conditioning plan. Ben, do you agree?
So to just confirm, we did go to 2% last year. As far as the reduction in class sizes, that was really associated with state aid. So we don't know our state aid numbers yet. So when they do come in, if they come in substantially lower than we thought, that could severely impact what we need to budget going forward. And that could include staffing, that could include, you know, building and maintenance, capital projects. So things like that, where we try to utilize the local fair share, which is the 2%, to sustain those things. So God forbid if we ever had to make staffing reductions or something like that, class sizes could increase from that. And as I went over the previous meeting, so when they describe below and above adequacy, so they state that we are above adequacy, meaning that they're saying that we should rely on the local fair share more than the state. And that's where that comes into play with the formula of what they should be making the reduction for in accordance with S2. So I did mention that where that could be a possibility. The 33 students for a class size is not normally the normal parameters that which we set enrollment up for. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and we'll be definitely looking into that because that's okay.
Yeah. Ms. Chrysler, in response to your question, as I mentioned before, the prohibited acts section says that board members are not allowed to use their official position to secure an unwarranted privilege or advantage. So I'd have to know more about the facts and circumstances, but board members have to be careful. They're not allowed to throw their weight around and say, hey, I'm a board member and therefore you're to do this for me or to do that for me or give me a special privilege or advantage that wouldn't be available to anybody else.
Thank you very much. Vin, do you have next?
Oh, next up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think he did it. I think he wiped it down. Sorry. Okay. Hi, my name is Jamie Bensvenga. I live at 20 Jeanway, Marlboro. I wanted to just say, first of all, I wanted to congratulate all the new members, the re-elected members. I wanted to tell Dr. Hibbs that I hope he feels better. I just got over COVID and it was terrible. So my heart is with you. I get it. I did want to just address a few things that were said. First of all, I want to speak to anybody who stood up here, no matter what viewpoint that they had when they stood up here, because when we have opinions and they come from our hearts and they come from the way we feel passionately, they are impassioned. And I think that passion is good, and I think that differences of opinion is the way the world works, and that is okay. What's not okay, in my opinion, is just some of the level of vitriol that I see, and whether it be, as Mr. Thor said, on Facebook, or even in here, as members of the board were speaking, or as the superintendent was speaking, and I was watching from the back of the room. I had a really interesting vantage point. Just behavior that, as a mother and as a teacher, I wouldn't tolerate in my classroom and I wouldn't tolerate at home. So what does that look like? That looks like snickering, laughing out loud, threatening a board member, or thinly veiled threats towards a board member, no matter what I think of what the board member said. Just basic rules of adult behavior that I'm so shocked by every day, every single day, not in here, not just in here, not just on Facebook, but every day. Clearly, we're living in a very divisive time, very divisive time. So a good amount of the world is going to feel one way, while probably close to half is going to feel the other way. When we let our rules of decorum out of the window and we no longer speak to each other or address each other like adults, or when someone is speaking, allow them to have their word and sit and listen and be respectful, what do we have? So yeah, I sat back here and I watched, and I was just appalled by the yelling out over people who were speaking, the laughing, the calling out someone's name as the ethics violations were being spoken about. It's inappropriate, and it's really upsetting to me. That's number one. Number two, and I'll try to make it fast,
1
I
minute.
know. I'm also a teacher in Manalapan, so I have this really cool perspective where I teach in a town very similar to this one. So I'm a teacher, I get that perspective, but I'm a mom. 2 of my 4 children have IEPs and have gone through the special education program in this district, and they've always treated my children very well. I can only speak from my perspective. To answer the gentleman who said that students will look to me with less credibility because I enforce a mandate, a school mandate or a state mandate, I just respectfully want to tell you that I disagree with that. Why do I disagree with that? I'm teaching 21 years. I have never once brought my personal views into the classroom, but I will enforce a mandate that was brought down to me by my school or by my state. I have had the good fortune of having nothing but the most wonderful relationships with parents and children going forward. I was voted Teacher of the Year last year because of how hard I worked during the pandemic. I drove assignments to kids' houses. So with that said, and I will stop, with that said, I think that as a community, if you want change, if you feel that we need to do better, act like adults.
Is Mr. Daywoman next?
You want to flip for it? No? You good? Okay.
Acting like an adult. Annette Seward, 18 Nashua Drive. I just want to bring to light a survey that I conducted this week, because I feel like Facebook can be used as a tool, not just a slandering tool or a childish way of behavior that this is being depicted as. I asked questions in the Marlboro community page and in the Fresh Face School Facebook page regarding their opinions on the Move Forward plan, the test and stay plan, which no one's talking about tonight for some reason. The number one thing that was voted on is that healthy children shouldn't be tested in both surveys. I got the most votes on that opinion. The next vote was for test one, test them all. The second most voted on both polls was that the testing shouldn't be discriminatory to vaccine status. Unfortunately, the most voted of all of the questions I was asked is that I will not give consent to school. Medical consent does not belong in school. I feel like these are important points that you should take into consideration when you're finalizing your test and stay plan this week. We are expecting that as parents, as January was promised to us. I also would like to bring up the point that I have seen firsthand being here in present board meetings, that this picture of crazy that's being painted for passion is also childish. We have a right to come up to this microphone and speak our minds, and whether or not you agree with it or not doesn't give you the right to pass judgment on our behavior. Ironically, she left. So please don't misunderstand our passion for a personal vendetta, which is considered to be unethical, right? Let's all try to understand that the most important part here are the kids, and what I'm going to do for my kids doesn't always fit what everyone else is going to do for their kids. But in this case, Facebook spoke positively towards how we all feel together as a community. We weren't divided on this. I didn't exclude masks should be mandatory. I didn't exclude I will do whatever it takes to keep my child in school. I did not exclude I will test my child in my own medical facility. I just think you guys should take into consideration how many parents are not going to consent with your test and stay. Thank you.
Vinny? Oh, yeah.
Mr. Daleman?
Leo Davelman, 51 Buttonwood Drive. Mr. Zimmer, you just made my day when you said, and I've never heard this said before, that this board's actually at your prerogative can hold meetings in different formats, that there are absolutely no rules prohibiting that. I strongly urge the newly elected leadership to consider other forms of dialogue with the community at other meetings that are within your prerogative, because this is not dialogue. I think we've gotten pretty used to sort of just lobbing things at each other. We could do better. Having said that, because we don't have a dialogue, I'm sort of in a bit of a tough spot. Dr. Hibbs, I'm speaking to you right now. Every communication you and I ever have, I do my best to keep completely confidential. I'm going to ask you a question in public. I'm going to have to somewhat foresee what your answer is going to be and ask some follow-up questions, because, again, I won't get to come up here again. So the question I need to ask you is, what occurred yesterday through no fault of yours, right? You can't predict the weather. But what occurred yesterday with a snow day school closure without a single drop of snow anywhere near Marlboro is an absolutely terrible event that we need to get to the bottom of and get to the root cause of. So I'm going to ask you to speak to the situation and the root causes of it. And the follow-up questions that I need to ask you is, if part of that reasoning had to do with staffing constraints that were unanticipated, and I urge you to speak to the board about the plans you and the administration are putting together to make sure that we are protected from shocks that we don't control to our staffing better than we were yesterday. And what I specifically mean by that is around other towns' decisions affecting who can come to work in our schools. I don't know the facts. You do. Hopefully you can speak to them in terms of just how thin our margin is on any given day for people not showing up to work and how that impacts our normal plans for handling snow. We budget for 3 snow days per year. New Jersey on average gets 10 days of snowfall per
1 minute,
season.
Mr. Dableman.
The presumption is that 7 out of 10 we can handle through our normal procedure, right? That's how we've always done it. If based on the current situation, COVID and whatever else is going on, tight labor market, all the other things, if we're so thin that we can no longer be confident that we can handle the other 7, hopefully you can have a mitigation plan in place. Members of the board, I strongly urge you, I learned today a lot about what you can do in your capacity. I urge you to urge Dr. Hibbs to prioritize contingency planning. We will have more snow. This was the first supposed snow day. We'll have a lot more. We can't lose 10, 11, 12 days because of some snow might come. So please address that. And I think I'm the only person who has not congratulated the newly seated and reseated board members. So congratulations.
Sure, Mr. Davelin, I'm happy to address that. So let me just sketch for you what that day looked like. Mr. Balone and I left our houses, or I left my house at 4:15-ish to come help clean buses off because we were very, very shorthanded. We were set to open. We had a thin margin. We probably couldn't have had that many more drivers that called out and been successful. Teaching staff, IAs, staff across the board, as I can even attest, people are getting sick. And that's not something we could really even debate. It's people are getting sick everywhere. This virus, this variant is absolutely being passed. You know, to address your question of, you know, the why, when I sent out a communication that night prior that we were monitoring and that we were watching staffing. When I was about 45 minutes into my ride at 5 a.m. at about exit 7A, it became very clear to me through a communication strand with the regional and then the rest of the county that everyone was really looking for a close. So the weather, which was concerning to me, was a concern. And then also what was a concern was the fact that with all the surrounding districts closing, it was a concern. And to be very honest with you, I didn't have access to School Messenger at 5 o'clock in the morning because I was trying to come help clean out buses. And we sent out a communication that closed for the snow day because the snow was the concern. Just as a general discussion, please understand that, you know, people are getting sick. You can see this everywhere. Our case rates are astronomically high. They're higher than they've ever been, both staff and students. Our nurses are completely drowning and are doing an exceptional job, but people are getting sick. So in that moment, you know, we did the best we can, Mr. Davelman, you know, and I think I effectively communicated that to you, that we didn't have a lot of room to spare. And in that moment, I'm trying to get the information out to the community. So I had to actually be in contact on a dark road with my secretary who actually sent everything out. So I think I understood through your communications, Mr. Davelman, that you wanted more information up front. And I think I really try to give more information up front when I can. But, you know, my decision was based on the weather, which I honestly thought was coming, you know, which it should have come. And, you know, I think you used epic fail or something of the like of a weather call, and it was wrong. And I can totally acknowledge that it didn't snow. I mean, it didn't, and it was supposed to. And, you know, honestly, we had concerns for snow. We had concerns for staffing. So that's where we are. Going forward, you know, to be very honest, you know, you're going to press me for a contingency plan. I think it's a very fair thing to say in realistic times, and we are certainly not living in realistic times. We are living in times where, you know, an astronomical, you know, a high number of people are sick. And, you know, I don't know what you do for a living, but I would venture to say if 30% of your staff were out, it'd be a problem. And this is what we're experiencing. So, which is why we're actually having discussions about expanding the subpool. So honestly, we're doing the very best we can. Right now, we are seeing a high number of illnesses and a lot of people and kids being out. So we will always do our best to staff, always do our best to have, you know, good and quality contingency plans. This is just the height of this variant. And unfortunately, we have to get through it. And it doesn't really matter what people's beliefs are on it or not on it, or masks or not masks. The reality is that people are getting sick. So we have to deal with that factor, and we will, and I think we're dealing with it effectively. And I put out to the community that my intention is to stay full day, absent two distinct scenarios, one of which we can't staff. And can't staff could be, I can't staff a part of the district. It might be a building that has to close. It could be the whole district if I don't have enough drivers. And then the other scenario would be is if we have massive outbreaks that happen in the buildings, which we haven't been seeing, but we are seeing more transmissibility or more transmission, lately with the variant. So thankfully, I can say just from our experiences that, the variant is presenting with different symptoms, unlike different variants or the COVID of the past. So, Mr. Davelman, sorry I couldn't get you more at 5 o'clock in the morning. We did the best I can, but I'll certainly take that into consideration going forward. Your sentiments, and then also your concept of contingency plans. Thank you, sir. Mr. President.
Thank you. Good. Okay, so there is no further public comments. What? Oh, hey, Aldo.
Hi.
We should just make sure that we're done with the public participation, because we should close that out before we move on to other stuff.
Do you have? I'm sorry. Don't rush.
Anu Shanbhag, 906 Matthew Road. I just wanted to express to you guys, thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I follow the news of what's going on around the country, around the world, and how so many kids have lost so much education, kids are sick, and you guys have held us together so well so far. And you don't get to hear most parents, because we are happy and grateful for the work that you're doing. You're not only just the board, you guys are parents of kids like us. And my presumption is that you guys care about our kids as much as you care about yours. And you're going to make decisions that are going to put the safety of our kids before anything else. So I just wanted to express that, because I don't think it gets expressed enough. You just hear all the problems, which is the nature of these meetings. People come here, only people that have issues come here, and that is good. They get to express their feelings, but you also need to hear, I wish there was a way for you to also hear the majority of people that are grateful and in gratitude to you for doing a wonderful job in a very, very difficult time where people have really strong emotions and are politicizing things that should not be politicized, because these are our kids. If they're not here, education doesn't matter and nothing matters. So you have kept our schools open, you've kept our schools running. So many other cities and states have shutdowns, and you guys managed to hold it together. And I just wanted to make sure that you know that we support you. So thank you.
Vin, do you have any? Okay, at this time we're going to close public comments number 2. Before I go, oh, I'm sorry, Aldo. I'm sorry.
Is it okay for, I just had a question. Is it all right if I, based on, Mr. Dovelman's comment just before, and listening about the, what Dr. Hibbs was saying about the test to stay, are we seeing, like, with this new variant, are we seeing, like, in the last couple weeks, any kind of, like, upticks that are maybe, like, changing our mind on the test to stay? Dr. Hibbs, I'm just wondering, because I feel like in the last couple weeks, probably 9 out of 10 people I know were looking for tests for their kids, and I'm just wondering what effect that's going to have on, the 1.46%, I think you said it was, and just, if it is going to have any impact on it, or, what your thoughts were about it going forward.
Sure, I can address that. Mr. Paterno, you were finished, correct? It's so hard to hear at times.
Yes.
He got everything out, right, guys?
He's good. You can
you
respond.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. So yeah, tests are a concern without a doubt. Rover Labs, who we partnered with, has initially committed to having us have enough tests. I can say that, in the time frame since the last meeting and this meeting, we've sent some correspondence that has not been given the attention that it needs to yet. So we do not have, we've been stockpiling tests that they've been sending to keep, but we would need more for everything. And I want to be very honest with everybody in the room, even though I can't really see everybody anymore or at all. We understand and hear the viewpoint of it absolutely makes no sense, the rules as written, because the vaccinated and unvaccinated are all getting sick. I want to be very clear that I publicly agree with that statement and what we're seeing. And I think that the guidance that we've been given, unfortunately, since the beginning has unfortunately been late and sometimes is too restrictive. So what we need to do as a district is administratively come up with a plan that is fair to all children. And when anyone stands at the microphone and says something to the effect of, it's, my kid's vaccinated or my kid's not, and it shouldn't matter. Listen, we're seeing everybody get sick. I completely agree with that. And that is a discussion point for our administrative and nurses in developing this plan. To address your specific question, I wish I knew the answer. We're trying to get all the tests, but we can only obviously do a test to stay, Mr. Paterno, if we can have those tests, which is out of my hands. So at this moment, we're putting a full-scale push on a couple different options with Rover Labs, which could include possible PCR tests. We inquired about that because that was a question that was raised by the community. We also inquired about the antigen. Just to clarify, the antigen tests that they supply are not the antigen tests that go all the way up, that feels like it's going into your brain. It really is just an outside nose swab. So they're not the ones that go all the way up that cause the blinding, searing pain and make your eyes water. Not asking to change your mind, just as a clarifier. So long and short of that question is we would need the test, obviously, to do test to stay, and we're pushing as hard as possible to make that be an ability and a reality.
Thank you, Dr. Hibbs. At this time, before public comments, I would like to do new business. It's not on the agenda, but I'd like to do that. Without delay, I would like to make a motion and discuss and vote on updating our board committees to the following. I'd like to explore 2 new committees. Remove the DIAC for the board committee because it's better use of resources elsewhere, but to keep it as a district committee. Also add special needs committee. Thank you, Kathleen, for that suggestion. Also, I would also like to add security and safety committee, which includes counseling. And I'd like to revise the name building and grounds to building and grounds and beautification. Can I have a second on the conversation?
There's a motion on the floor. Dr. Heller is requesting a second to that motion, which would generate discussion. Somebody could second it.
I second.
Discussion. Listen, I think that I hear each one of you loud and clear. I've heard different members of this board, and I took that into consideration, as I noted with Kathleen, and I think we could use a special needs committee. I also believe that security, and what we lose focus on is security safety committee. And what I'm saying with this is the safety of our children while they're in school. We're not talking about masks. We're not talking about anything with COVID. I'm talking security, okay? That is very important to me. And I would hope as a parent that would be important to anyone on this board. That would be first and foremost. And the building and grounds to buildings and grounds and beautification, the reason I wanted to add beautification is because when we took a tour of the schools with many of the new members, we saw what can be done just with a coat of paint or something of that effect. And the schools, I mean, I can only speak for myself. They looked amazing. They looked absolutely amazing what the schools look like, you know, with the eyes. So this is what I'm looking to do. Again, it's a small step, but at least it's a step. And, you know, it's about baby steps, and that's what one of these baby steps. So I'm looking to do that. So that's where I'm coming from in my head. So, yes, Christina.
Dr. Heller, I missed what you said you wanted to remove. Which committee?
Well, I wanted to remove the DIAC committee.
What does that stand for? I'm sorry.
It's yeah, please, because I always get screwed with. Excuse me.
Mr. Rosado, the DIAC is the District Evaluation Advisory Committee, and essentially it was mandated by the New Jersey Department of Education a few years ago. They, I don't remember exactly, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they said you can still hold your DIACs, but they're no longer required. And essentially, in layman's terms, what the committee does is it is a group of stakeholders, including union representation, administrators, teachers in all grade levels, representing all grade levels, supervisors. I chair the committee, and essentially the intent is that teachers have and staff members have a way to voice their concerns if they feel that their evaluations are problematic, can be improved. So we typically meet a few times a year. I always start the year with a DIAC and usually end the year with a DIAC, and then meet anytime in between if needed. We look at the various evaluation models for staff members. They initially raise their concerns at the building level through their school improvement panel. That's another acronym, which is a SKIP. The SKIP concerns that are related to evaluation make its way up to the DIAC. We discuss it at a round table and then walk out of that meeting with recommendations.
May I speak? So why would we want to do away with that? Wouldn't that allow teachers the ability to grow professionally if they're, let's say, using the Danielson framework, for instance, and they get feedback from a supervisor? Wouldn't we want to encourage the growth of our educators?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Dr. Heller, but I don't think Dr. Heller wants to get rid of the DIAC.
Oh, I thought it said remove.
No, I don't want to get rid of the committee.
He just
I
wants
apologize. I thought you said removed.
No, absolutely not, 100%.
Okay,
I am totally on the same page with you. What I'm saying is that we keep it in the school district, that the teachers collaborate with supervisors.
So we will not be a part of that any
We
longer.
would not be a part of it. Right. And this was taken by the suggestion of another board member, that our resources, our use in those committees, and Mr. Balone could attest to it, is not, how would you say,
well,
from my understanding?
I think so from a general perspective. Mrs. Rosado, if you were on the DIAC, you would be a complete asset. You're in education. But let's see, anyone who is not an educator, right? Mr. Petrun, I don't think you are, correct? So if you were to sit on the DIAC, not to say you couldn't bring good ideas, but I think your perspective is just not, you're not evaluated by a principal. So your perspective and input on that meeting may be limited to no fault of your own. So I think what Dr. Heller is proposing is to just not have 2 board members sit on that committee and just have everyone else sit on the committee that did except board members. Is that correct?
That was it.
Okay.
It was suggested to replace that, meaning add the special needs, because of it wasn't being used from my perspective, not my perspective, from other people, because I listened to people, and I wanted to get the feedback, and that was where that was the reason for my proposal.
No,
So
and
it
I
wasn't-
think the special needs is a definite, needed committee. I think that's a fantastic committee to implement. I just wanted some, clarification because I wasn't familiar with that. But thank you.
Well, I got educated as well. I mean, we all get educated and we're always learning, but that was my point of view, is that we can have, there's so many committees that you can create, but I think it's a matter of using it effectively and using it to really grow different areas, especially where I say the Special Needs Committee, which, unbelievable, and thank you, Kathleen, again, and then the Security and Safety Committee, because I feel that it's important for our board members to be a part of that, which includes counseling as well, because mental health is involved with that, because I think that we are overlooking with COVID. Unfortunately, it's shadowed, it's clouded our minds, but Michigan really opened my eyes, even though there were other previous experiences. I think that's going to be, to me, that's a win for every parent in this district. So that was my thought process. So
Randy, it's Jess, sorry.
Hello?
Would you be replacing the security and safety with another committee, or would it be in addition to?
No, it would be its own committee. So it would be Security and Safety Committee, which it would encompass or bring about or bring in the counseling department as part of that security and safety, because we're talking about the safety of our children, and mental health is definitely one of those things.
So just a new committee. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
I'm sorry, a new committee. What I'm suggesting, ladies and gentlemen, is Special Needs Committee, the Security and Safety Committee, and the Building and Grounds, to Building and Grounds and Beautification. It used to be called B and G. I want to call it BG and B. It's all semantics, I guess, but I think that beautification is important, because if you really look and actually enter these classrooms in these schools, it blew me away, because I had not seen the schools for the last 5 years. And when I went in, it was a 180-degree difference. It was amazing what these principals have done in that school, in these schools, elementary schools, middle schools. It was really good. So that's why I wanted to add those. And again, it's baby steps, right? And you know, it's great discussion and everything else. That is what my goal is to have discussion, listen to what you have to say, listen to what everybody else has to say, and we decide. And that's really what it's come down to. But I wanted to respectfully put these committees forward now, because what's going to happen is I'm going to be sending out a survey, and what happens is that survey, you choose the committees you want, and it's not guaranteed, but again, I would try to do the best that I can, and then you would be given a committee. That's how it works out.
Is there somewhere I can see all the committees?
Oh, it's all going to be provided to you.
Okay.
And everything's going to be totally upfront, and you know exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Alda.
So just a question. I'm not really familiar with the full list of the current committees, but is there one that currently is, like a parental involvement type committee, where we could almost get a gauge from the community on items that
I'm actually wonderful that you said that.
Yeah,
because
I don't know how to. I'm not. I don't really know how to present it. But what I'm thinking is, something that, I don't know how these committees are formed. If it's, you just.
Well, the committees is formed just so to help and guide you guys. Is a committee is formed, small group, that doesn't speak for the board, but hears the information prior. So then what happens is they then present to the board as a whole, okay? So it's done in committee form, because they tackle all the stuff and then discuss it as a whole. To make your point, I actually put a lot of thought into this with regards to considering putting together, not having a committee, but putting together a board liaisons. And what board liaisons would do is they would speak to the public. They would have conversations with the public. almost similar to a committee, but not a committee, where they're bringing back information to us so they can rest assured that they're being heard. And it would be maybe rotated because everybody gets a hand in that. There's a lot of ideas that I have that I want to talk with everyone with.
Right.
And that's why I want to make sure that there's a lot of, I'm sorry my back is towards you guys.
Randy?
Yes, nobody takes that joke. Go.
Randy,
Yeah.
it's Tricia.
Yes, Tricia.
I'm sorry. It is hard to hear you guys.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Were you finished? I'm sorry.
No, go.
I thought was interesting, the idea of maybe, so, you know, we do meetings, regular meetings like this, which I think are fairly, are efficient. We do special meetings and we do the workshop meetings. But in the conversation with Mark, he talked about a town hall style meeting. And I thought that was really interesting. So I think it dovetails on what you're talking about, but it was hard for me to hear you. So I'm sorry if I'm off topic. But I think that I would prefer that we consider, you know, maybe a workshop meeting becoming a town hall style meeting, which then allows the board as a whole to maybe have more of a dialogue. I don't know, is that what you were talking about?
Not necessarily, but something like that. I'm open to conversation about that and, you know, figuring out the tweaks of it. Again, this is conversation that I'm being transparent with the board and trying to make sure that everybody knows where my head is at, because I feel that I hear the community. I've always heard the community. In fact, there are times when I believe we're saying the same thing, but just different. I swear, it's just a matter of getting to know me, getting to know Kathleen, getting to know Jill and everybody else. I'm just saying that a lot of the times we're saying the same things just in different ways. That's just my opinion. But again, my goal in my capacity is to work with everyone, hear what they have to say, just like my speech said, and that's what I'm looking to do. Aldo?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's what I was trying to get at. I mean, if we could have something, you know, where it's a little less formal than the 3 minutes, you know, and I'm not talking about redoing the structure of the meeting, but I'm saying, you know, that's why when you brought up the committee, I thought perhaps that would be the correct avenue to maybe approach it. But if there's something that we can do where we can have a dialogue back and forth with parental involvement and, you know, really hearing, you know, ultimately, listen, you know, when people come up to the microphone, it's usually not for praises. It's because they're frustrated, and you know, and that's what I saw from being in that chair. You know, those chairs prior to today, and a lot of times, you know, it's stuff that can be figured out with a quick conversation, and you know, just really like nurturing it instead of just saying, you know, no back and forth and that's it. You know, like no. If we have some type of parental involvement where we can have a back and forth, I think it would do wonders for the rapport between the board and the community.
And I think we're on the same,
yeah.
We're saying the same thing. And it's just a matter of figuring out the logistics and everything else, because again, it's just it's a thought. And when you have a thought, it can become something. And that's why I think, yeah, I'm on the same page.
Okay.
We're saying the same thing.
All right.
I don't want to make it a committee. I want to make it more personable, where we're out in the public and we're communicating with them, so we hear what they have to say. That's just that's my thoughts.
Okay.
Well, again, I would just say that I like that idea. I think we also have to have structure to a town hall style meeting. The reason why we do the 3 minutes is not to cut people off. Even when people are saying nice things, it's 3 minutes. And the reason why we do that is because it's supposed to not allow one person to kind of overtake the meeting, right? Everybody should have time to speak. We haven't necessarily limited the amount of people, like, you know, at the convention. I heard another district's like, yeah, we limit 30 minutes, done. Like 30 minutes, oh my gosh, that's, wow, okay, that's it? 30 minutes, they're like, yep, 3 minutes, 10 comments, we're out. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting, we don't do that.
See, I think...
And I'm not saying we should be doing that. I like the idea of the dialogue back and forth, but dialogue back and forth within a meeting, which, you know, I think is somewhat problematic. I like the idea of the town hall. I like the back and forth. I just think we would also need to have structure, because we would need to make sure that the town hall is for the community and not just for a certain amount of voices. So if we're going to do the town hall, or we do something like that, I love it. I think we do, you know, we'd have to structure it, I guess is my point.
Yeah, I think you misunderstood what I was saying. I'm not saying like an unstructured type of event. You know, obviously there's got to be structure to it. My point was, I don't think that the issue really is even the 3-minute mark. Like, it could be 2 minutes or 5 minutes, but it's the fact that, you know, you can't have a conversation real quick. You know, you can't have a 3-minute conversation. It's a 3-minute comment and then a response. If you could have a 3-minute conversation back and forth, I think you'd get a lot more accomplished than just a 3-minute comment and then wait for the response. And, you know, that's just where I was going with it. If we could do something like that, you know, and I think it would help the level of frustration with, you know, people coming up from the community that are coming up to the mic to speak. And, you know, if we can also make results happen from it, then, you know, that's going to speak in volumes, and it'll start building rapport back. And really, that's, you know, in the end, the only one that's going to win from that is the kids, and that's what we're here for.
And I also think the expectation, to your point, if people come to a public meeting of the board, they have maybe, you know, they're thinking it's going to be one thing, and it feels like a different experience for them, which might not be all that satisfying. So the intent, like, we know the intention, they have an intention, maybe the intentions aren't aligned, which I think does create some contention. And we need to, you know, we need to try to eliminate that as much as possible, because we are all community members with kids in our district, and we're all here for the same common goal. And I think that does get lost a lot, and we just need to keep bringing that back.
Mark, how'd this work?
Yeah, so we had the discussion. I think it's time for a roll call.
Okay. So should I repeat what I'm looking to, like, how does that work?
It's up to the board. If they want you to repeat it one more time just to bring it back full circle, you can certainly do
Can
that.
you repeat it? I just
Yeah, that's fine. It
sure
doesn't
it's in
matter.
clarity.
You know, I would like to, I made a motion to discuss the vote on the updating our board committees to the following. I wanted to add 2 new committees. First, I wanted to remove the DIAC for the board committee, not for the board. Add special needs committee, add security and safety committee, and change building and grounds to building and grounds and beautification. That's my motion.
Randy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Did you said buildings and grounds, and what was the last word?
Beautification.
Beautification?
Beautification. It's like making
Beautification, Suze.
Okay, that's what I thought he said. Okay, thank you.
She can hear me better than you, Randy.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. So that's my motion. I'm sorry. So we'll take roll call for that, Vinny?
Yep, I'm going to take roll call vote for the motion to revise and add such committees. So roll call vote, Mrs. Amster?
Yes.
Mrs. Branch?
Yes.
Mr. Petruno?
Yes.
Ms. Piernick?
Yes.
Mrs. Shrem?
Yes.
Mrs. Rosado?
Yes.
Mrs. Salaci?
Yes.
Mrs. Strafasi?
Yes.
And Dr. Heller?
Yes. So thank you very much for everyone to hear out the conversation. I think it was very helpful and it was very productive. and I'm looking forward and being optimistic. So what I'm going to do right now is executive session resolution.
We
don't. Okay.
We can adjourn the meeting.
Okay. So can I have a first?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, motion to adjourn. I'm sorry. Do I have a vote?
A second.
Christina? Yes, she's one.
She seconded it. Yep.
Seconded. Okay.
So you can do all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
Nope.
Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening. Stay safe, healthy, and we're out. Peace out. Thank you.
Good night.
I love
Good
saying
night.
that all the time.